Good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes. I'm glad that the rain gave us a big favor tonight, right? Nobody came in on a rowboat, I hope. My name is Raina Cash. I'm the executive editor of the Charlotte Observer, and I'm really excited to have you all out here tonight for such an important topic. We have made an effort at the Observer to bring ourselves closer to the communities that we serve. And this is just one of those efforts to do that. And we wanted to do it in a way that allows us to talk about really sometimes heavy, sticky topics, not always the easy stuff, to get into the gray. And we believe this conversation around gentrification and growth and how complex it is allows us to have a smart, spirited conversation about what it means, what it doesn't mean, when does it go from one thing to the next thing. So I'm glad that you're interested in that, and we have a wonderful panel to engage us in that conversation this evening. Thank you so much again for coming out. I won't take up much of your time. You'll want to hear more from them than you do from me. So thank you.
So, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for coming to this event. Gentrification versus growth. How do we stop it, or do we embrace it? And so, this is a community conversation that came up for me during our efforts with the mobile newsroom. The mobile newsroom was, as Raina just explained, our initiative to come into the communities, to learn more about the communities that the Charlotte Observer has not really covered in their entirety, to actually come in there and really write positive stories and more comprehensive stories about the community instead of just writing about crime or the negative things that happen in those communities. They're often Black and Brown communities. And so during my time at the mobile newsroom, both at the Sugar Creek Library branch and this branch over here on Beatties Ford Road, talking to residents, and they're coming up to me and asking them, which stories are missing from the news cycle that you'd like to see published and covered? And the topic of gentrification is the one that really rose to the top of the list. And so to do effective journalism and to maybe offer a solution, as Raina mentioned, we like to have these community conversations, and so we can give a chance for people to kind of sound off on what they're saying and what they're feeling, but also talk and hear from the experts who are covering it. And so we decided to convene a panel of community leaders, of neighbors, and others who are working in the field for that intimate conversation on the topic. And so, but before we start and introduce the panel, I just wanted to do a few housekeeping notes for this forum. We're going to have a discussion period with them for about 45 minutes. I'm going to ask them some questions, and they're going to respond and maybe talk, engage with each other, engage with me. And then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience at about 7 o'clock or so. Please refrain from coming up to the microphone. We have the microphone set up there before we start that period. And so now I'm going to turn it to the panelists, and they can introduce themselves, starting with the gentleman at the end there. Winston, okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Winston Robinson. I am founder and executive director of Applesauce Group. That is a local 501c3 where we throw the most amazingly fun parties and festivals on earth as a cover to connect people to life-enhancing resources. Our next event is on July 15th at West Complex, 1600 West Trade Street. Pull up, have a good time.
Thank you, Winston, for that. Go ahead, Boris.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Boris Henderson. My day job is at Aldersgate, where I'm the Chief Strategy Officer, which means most of what I do is real estate related and growth and operations. But my other job is I'm very involved in the community through serving on the Habitat International Board. I was born and raised here in Charlotte, and I'm also a seminary student. Not to become a pastor, I've made that clear, but my seminary studies is around the role of the church in communities that are gentrifying.
Hello, thank you all for coming out. My name is Ishmael Kayem. I'm an attorney here locally, and I'm a community organizer with the Housing Justice Coalition, or Charlotte Housing Justice Coalition. Grew up on the West Side, born and raised in Charlotte, had a chance to spend some time outside of Charlotte, got a lot of things to say about Charlotte, and hopefully we'll have a lively conversation.
Well, I'm not from here, actually. I'm from a long way away, the other side of the Atlantic, but I've been in America for longer than I lived in England. I've been here for 40 years. My name's David Walters. I'm an architect, a town planner, and I taught at UNC Charlotte for 30 years, and then I was done. I was privileged and proud during those 30 years to work with many Carolina communities and other communities in the Southeast that are dealing with very similar problems. These are almost universal. I was back home at my home in England a few weeks ago, and people in my hometown were talking about exactly what we're going to talk about tonight. And that is a fairly wealthy, white, middle-class town. And the middle class is getting gentrified out, and they are completely baffled by it. So we are not alone, but we face very complicated problems, and I guess one of the reasons I'm here is because I'm old. I've got quite a bit of history.
Thank you, David, and we'll circle back to some of those thoughts later in the program. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Malcolm Graham. I'm a member of the Charlotte City Council representing District 2. I serve as chairman of the City of Charlotte's Economic Development Committee and past chairman of the city's Affordable Housing Committee. The Corridors of Opportunity resides in the Economic Development Committee, a graduate of Johnson C. Smith University, done a lot of work on this corridor as well as others, and looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Quilla Brunson. I am a realtor, broker, team lead at Perfect House Group, powered by Realty One Group Select. I am a native of Charlotte. I actually graduated from West Charlotte High School, right across the street. And I'm also an investor, so I am very, dedicated to conversations like this for our community.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for that brief introduction. And so, my colleague and I, Gordon Rago, we just recently did a package on gentrification that kind of looked at, my story looked at what people think gentrification is or how it makes them feel. Gordon's story looked more at demolition permits happening in different neighborhoods. But my first question is gentrification, it feels and it looks different to different people. And so I think it would be very important to just establish, what gentrification is. And this question would be for either David or Ishmael. Can you all describe what gentrification is, just in a nutshell?
Yeah, you don't mind if I?
No,
Okay, all right.
That's why I put it there.
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer, but obviously, whenever you have a conversation, you have to develop an analysis of what you're talking about and try to define it. I would say gentrification, in a broad sense, can be thought of as sort of the loss or the replacement of one community with another, and typically the community that is being replaced has been there for some time. And this type of replacement or displacement, depending on how you think about it, has typically an economic element, has a cultural element, and I would say also has a political element, in that when you think about gentrification, it implicates issues of power in decision-making and the ability of people to be able to exercise control over their lived material conditions. So when we think about gentrification in the United States in particular, we're talking about the very way in which this country was founded, how it was created, the legacy of slavery, the legacy of industrialization, all the way up through segregation, deindustrialization, all the way up to where we are now. And that implicates I would say particularly for African American people, the struggle for self-determination, the struggle for civil rights and recognition, and also the preservation of culture and history that was developed when areas that are desirable now were not desirable before. So I'll just leave it at that, but gentrification is really complex, but I think the central theme is that there's like a loss of community, a loss of people, and there's a sense that people are not able to hold on to things that they would like to be able to hold on to.
Yeah, I would not disagree. Oops. Am I on? I would not disagree with any of that. I would only add that we are, I hope, going to probe some of that complexity because I've spent half my life in England and half my life in America. I can see that the process at its root of transformation, of economic and cultural transformation, is common to communities of very different types. Of my, working class white upbringing, when folks back home talk about gentrification, they talk about rich Londoners coming down, buying up all the houses, so the young people in my hometown have nowhere to live. They work 3 jobs and have to commute as best they can. That is one aspect of gentrification. America has very similar stories, but the local context, and importantly, the local history of the community is something that has to be very carefully researched and taken into account. And that's why things like the Observer series, helping the community to articulate the issue as you all see it, is an essential component to any kind of solution. And I use the word solution very tentatively, because it's a very difficult problem. You know that. I know that. We've got to try.
Right. Boris, did you want to say? I was going to do a follow-up question, but go ahead. You can.
I just want to add just a loose translation. I'm not always the sharpest tool in the shed, but I do want to just bring something very real in the room. There's a part of gentrification that speaks to the human element of people being exploited, people being pushed out, in the context of Charlotte in particular, and in some of the other communities surrounding Charlotte. People are struggling to pay taxes. People are struggling to live. And so there's policies and systems, serious systems in place that make it hard for people in those contexts to survive. So I think that's when most people think about gentrification, who are really on the ground, those are the experiences that they would speak to.
I find it interesting. So when I was talking to people to put my story together, there were all kinds of different, sort of red flags for them, what gentrification felt like to them. I mean, one gentleman talked about, we see them painting bike stripes or bike lanes. And they're like, we've never had that before. Why do we need that? And I was playing devil's advocate with the gentleman. I was saying, well, what's wrong with a bike lane? I mean, kids ride bikes, and he's like, the kids don't need bikes, they need programs. And so I guess the question is, what can we do to help people? So this is my second question, kind of. What can we do to help people feel like they're more a part of what the changes that are happening in their community? Because the community is changing for economic reasons, for a whole host of reasons, because that's just the ebb and flow of the market. And I guess this will be a question more for Winston and Quilla and Boris, of course, or anybody who'd like to answer. How can people feel like they're more advocates in what's happening in their neighborhoods and not feel like it's happening to them?
Well, I think, Lisa, kind of what you're speaking to is the greater issue of just the conundrum it feels like to be Black. Like, you feel like, resources, what are these? We're not supposed to have this. but you should. Just the idea of having to reset a mind frame or to condition yourself to accept what you're supposed to have is an issue within itself. And that's just the idea of the complexity of things that we have to deal with, because you do feel like this isn't here for you because you've lived in this community for so long and you were ignored. And now that there's a systemic shift, now the resources are coming. So you look at the things you're supposed to have with a bit of spite. So,
You're suspicious.
And again, these are things that you should enjoy. Yet the things you should enjoy and should look forward to, you have to see through a skewed vision because you realize you feel like they came because of the neighborhood dynamics changing.
What do you think, Quilla, in your experience as a real estate agent and just buying houses to help people feel like they can be more advocates for what's happening in their community, and to Winston's point, to kind of accept that, that they deserve these amenities?
Yeah, I agree with Winston's point. Like, if those resources are available, like I know some communities created a community organization, or they may have already had an organization before gentrification came in. Get involved, show up. You're here today, do the same thing for your community. Like, use your voice, speak up, and try to make a difference. Of course, everything you say cannot always be taken into account, but from a real estate perspective, it's kind of a touchy subject in the real estate world also, especially me being from here. Like, I've seen these neighborhoods transform. I've seen what these neighborhoods were once, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and today they are completely different. But what can you do as an individual? Come together as a community. Like, don't try to tackle these issues or these resources by yourself, because the same resources that are available to them are available to us. So always keep that in mind, and whether it's in housing or medical or even the economy, your job, the same resources that are available to them are available to us. So come together and use those resources.
Yeah, let me chime in. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. And I want to jump for the first question and the second one. So gentrification requires a commitment to preserve diversity, character, tradition of a community. At the same time, promoting economic growth and development that community deserves and needs. It's a balancing act. And one that I think that collaboration between community, government, and the private sector can address in an open and honest and transparent way. 110 folks every day, 7 days a week, move to the city of Charlotte. They all are looking for affordable housing, jobs, transportation to get back and forth to their homes and their jobs. As a city, we can't annex anymore, so all the development now are infill developments. And you're right. I grew up on Beatty's Ford Road as a student at Smith. Beatty's Ford Road, I-85 and Sugar Creek, North Tryon and Graham Street, Albemarle and Central Avenue. All these corridors have been historically underinvested in for a wide variety of reasons, because when the city was growing, they went to University City, they went to Ballantyne, they went further out. They can't go out anymore. And so now they're coming back to our communities and I gave the example earlier today that I would get a phone call at 12 o'clock from a constituent saying, Malcolm, you're doing a great job. We love that Chase Bank is coming to Beatty's Ford Road. We love that the Historic Accessories Club is getting underway. We love what's happening with the development right across the street from the library. A medical center is coming there soon. And then 12:10, I'll get another phone call saying, you're running people away from Beatty's Ford Road. What are you doing? We don't need ATV alternatives to violence. Don't run these people away from the corner. That corner used to belong to Mr. McDonald's 50 years ago. We want it to remain the same. And so our goal as a city is to balance that, to make sure that people are part of the change and not victims of it.
But how do you get that across to the community? How do you teach them? Because that's part of what I wanted this forum to
It
be.
is the second part of your question, which is community engagement and having conversation just like this. It's making sure that everyone understands, as Winston said, they deserve bike lanes. You know, they deserve EV charging stations on Beatty'sford Road, on Tryon Street or Tuckasegee, right? Those are essentials. They're not because someone of a different hue is moving in. You deserve those type of amenities. This community, Beatty'sford Road, has been underinvested for years. And so we're going to make sure that those who have historically been here receive the resources that they deserve and earn, and those who are moving into here to our communities blend in and be a part of what we're doing and not taking over what has been done.
But Councilman, so I don't mean to pick on you, but there are people that have historically have been living here, and they feel like they're being priced out because, as you know, there was a revaluation. Like some homes went up like tens of thousands of homes went up, over 200%. People complaining about their taxes. A lot of people can't take that hit. A lot of older folks can't. I just, talked to a gentleman that he had a home up in Hidden Valley, and then he also had his mother's home here, and he had to give up the mother's home because he just couldn't pay the taxes on both of them. And there's a lot of people, but he had someplace to go because he has another home. But a lot of people, they don't have any place to go. So, I mean, and I don't know if you have an answer to that, but what about those folks? What's going to happen to them when all the fancy homes, they come in and the other homes are being torn down?
Not only are new homes coming in, but we're maintaining the affordable housing that's already existing in the community. So it's not either or, we're doing both. You see the bigger homes, and Lincoln Heights, for an example, went through a historic destination where the housing stock now has to remain the same from the way it used to be back in the early days. So a Mac mansion won't be built next to someone's single family home. So it's making sure that we have resources, services that like staying in place. We have the committee that's looking at gentrification for the city of Charlotte, citizen involvement. But I would be disingenuous, not honest, to tell you that this city is growing in leaps and bounds. And even the tax question, for an example, the city of Charlotte hadn't raised taxes in 5 years. Now the county did, so we're all going to feel the bump. But we're trying as much as we can to keep the city affordable. But when 110 people are coming in every day and they're looking for housing, everything is going up. And so it's working with people where they are and making sure that they understand that there is resources available to support where they are.
Did you have some points?
And one of the keys to accessing the resources is the trust issue, because of the way people in our communities have been exploited and pushed aside in the past. So you come in with resources, they may not feel comfortable accessing those resources. They may think, what are the handcuffs involved if I sign up for this critical home repair program? So one of the things that I've observed in, Optimist Park in West Davidson and the Pottstown community what's present here, they're doing a remarkable job addressing the trust issue and then turning the pyramid upside down. I think oftentimes we come into communities as educated folks, we know it all, but really there's so much wisdom and resources in the community. Community engagement is really walking into a room and letting the community tell you what the community needs, exactly what it needs, and how you can help them truly help themselves and to empower themselves. And there's great examples in the historic West End, Pottstown, as I mentioned, and other places in this city that get it and they're doing it right.
I just wanted to ask a couple questions to the audience. How many of you have heard of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan? Okay. How many of you have heard of the Corridors of Opportunity? All right. How many of you have heard of the Unified Development Ordinance? How many of you would say you feel empowered as a community member? Right, like that's, I think when we talk about this issue, right, of gentrification in terms of thinking of solutions, the reality is that if you don't have a seat at the table where decisions are being made, you are gonna be basically a sacrificial victim of economic growth. That is what the historical record shows, particularly in reference to African American communities. That's just the fact. I mean, Charlotte is growing as a city, but decisions and policies drive how that growth occurs, where that growth occurs, and who benefits from that growth, right? And so I think given Charlotte is a very business-oriented place. It kind of always has been. But I think at this particular juncture, there really is going to have to be, I think, and I don't want to, I'm not downplaying community efforts. I'm not downplaying organizing that has happened. There's been the Charlotte Uprising. There's been all these different things that have happened. But I think there's going to have to be an approach that is bottom-up, people-oriented, and one that really prioritizes community organizing in a way that speaks to all of the things that I just mentioned, because those are the policies that are determining where the dollars are going and who's benefiting from the dollars. So I would say education is important, and that's mutual education between like people up here and you all. And, you know, like I live in Clinton Park, like I'm, you know, it's not, you know, this or that, but it's gonna be that, and it's also gonna be, I think, organizing as well, so.
Winston, you had some additional comments? And then David, I guess.
So while I do agree with a lot of those sentiments, I think it's deeper because, again, there's a heritage in America in which you can literally devalue property by existing in it while being black. That's all you got to do. You just got to be black and go to a place, and that's it. The property value goes down. That's a legacy. That's a heritage. That's who we are as a nation. I'm from Charlotte. I'm from Wilmore. And when I was 20, 19 in college, I remember coming down from college on holidays. Each time I would come down, 6 or 7 childhood families were gone. I couldn't, I didn't know what that meant at the time, but we were being replaced. Now, during this time, from 99 to let's say 04, I remember seeing the first young white lady with a dog jogging in Wilmore, and I thought, what is going on? I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I knew it was crazy. However, while young white, while they were being encouraged and shown Wilmore, I remember she bought Mr. Greer's house for $90,000, and I thought that was insane. So during this time, while she's and people like her are moving to Wilmore, upwardly mobile black people who are transplanting to Charlotte are getting pushed, we're steered along to those neighborhoods along W.T. Harris. Now, 20 years later, I remember Vance was a new school, about 80% white, 15% black, 5% other. 20 years later, yeah, exactly. And if you bought that house for $100,000 in 2002 along W.T. Harris, right now it's probably a very respectable $350,000, $375,000. But that house you bought for $90,000 in Wilmore, $700,000-800,000. And that's the difference, because a flock of black folk went here. But Wilmore, that's, again, those are the transitions that we don't have anything to do with. I just want to live somewhere. However, me being black in the legacy of America, I don't have the same opportunities as my counterparts.
You're almost saying that the problem is way bigger than just housing. It's like it starts.
Yes.
So where does it start? In the schools, at the homes, the table.
We gotta, as a nation, we have to be willing to call a thing a thing. I had my good friend Justin Harlow, Dr. Justin Harlow, one of the brightest young minds in this city. I remember he went on WFAE and called himself a black gentrifier, because he bought a home in Smallwood.
What? A black
because he's a dentist, very successful, and he went into Smallwood, which was a lower income community, if you will, and built a nice big house. And he called himself, he kind of said, "Yeah, I'm a black. I get it." And I told Justin, no, you're just resilient. Had you had access to the same systems as the white version of Justin Harlow, the gentrification would be the kind Mark Zuckerberg is doing in Hawaii, just taking the whole island. But he is, when he's reduced to have to live a black life, he only has so much access. And that's the frustrating part about these discussions. We all act as if the playing fields have always been even. Like, oh, you got a choice, you can do it. No, this is not the same game we're playing. But we have to call a thing and acknowledge it.
David, you had some.
I was going to go back to the little hand-raising exercise about the alphabet soup of the UDO.
Your microphone, that's okay.
Yes? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, the Unified Development Ordinance, the Comprehensive Plan, et cetera, these are documents which, to me, as a professional in the community design field for 50 years, I find them very difficult to fully understand, because the issues they are trying to deal with are very complicated. And there's a false idea that you can reduce everything complicated to some simple formula and plow ahead. In terms of community development and city development, that doesn't work. The complexity has to stay, because you're the complexity. I'm the complexity. I mean, look at my skin, right? The reason that I'm brought into efforts like this is that I have a perspective based on history, a wide-ranging history. So I've learned things that work in all contexts, things that don't work in some context. But there's hard work to do in every community to understand the Unified Development Ordinance. Not every bit of it, but the basic concepts, the comprehensive plan. It talks in language that is somewhat privileged. I mean, I understand like 90% of it, but if you don't know enough of the language, it's really hard. So it's about not just community empowerment, but community education. The city really is the agency, and non-profits to help explain.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, people, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. Like, all the stuff that these policies and stuff, they just know how it makes them feel and stuff. So I don't know what the solution is, and that was going to be my next question to you, Councilman, about, what can you all do towards, educating people, striking that balance of just, I don't know. It seems like it's almost like something that we have to embrace it, because it's
a part of the change that the city council went from a planning document that we were using for the last 50 years, and June 1st, after a three-year process of community engagement via COVID-19, where we had a wide variety of Zoom meetings and trying to reach people where they were, where we could, to a new document that's about 800 pages. And if you know 90% of it, you're a good man, because it's on my desk at home, and even I have to go back through it and thumb through it and call staff and say, explain this to me like a third grader, right? So it is somewhat difficult. There has and there will be a series of meetings throughout the community with neighborhood associations, educating, informing, and updating them. Those are ongoing. There will be one on Beatty'sford Road on July 25th at Johnson C. Smith, where we're targeting all of the neighborhood leaders and their board members in District 2 to come and sit down with the planning staff. Planning staff is willing to come to various neighborhood board meetings to do a in-person review of them. But you got to stay involved. You got to stay engaged. You got to ask tough questions of me and others. I have no problem being held accountable, but you got to do the work. It's a give and take. And it's complicated stuff, right? And there's no easy solution other than getting in the game, being resilient while you're playing, and protecting and advocating for your neighborhoods and your communities. It's extremely important.
Aquila, do you have anything to add in terms of just what sorts of things that you might be doing on your end as a realtor to kind of help people understand wealth building and understand home buying and just like how many people come to you that they just don't have it on paper, but they really want a home?
A lot of people. I received my real estate license in 2015. I became a realtor so that I could help first-time home buyers and educate them on the front end so that they wouldn't purchase a home and go into default and, have a short sale or foreclosure situation. A lot of first-time home buyers today cannot even find an affordable home in Charlotte. Like, it's not an option. And even people that rent homes is not an option. Like, affordable housing does not exist in Charlotte anywhere. So that's the biggest problem within the real estate industry. And people are being pushed out from these communities around the city to the communities, the other cities and towns outside of Charlotte. Those cities are not even affordable anymore because the price of everything is increasing because it starts here, I think a lot of the plans and developments that the city has, it's not for the people of the city. Honestly, it's not for the people because the people are not considered when you think about the trickle-down effect. When you think about them, it's a money grab. It's a money grab. They put the developers first and what the developers want, and they say that it's going to be this percentage of affordable housing, but that percentage of affordable housing does not even cover 1% of the people who can't afford a house. So it's a lot of people that call me. I receive calls every week from people that are looking for somewhere affordable to rent when the average rent costs are $1,600 for 1 bedroom, but you have to qualify and make 3 times the rent amount. No job in Charlotte for middle class, lower class is paying 3 times the rent amount. So it's a lot of issues that the city does not consider when planning these developments and working with these developers that they seem to favor. From the people's standpoint, the city seems to favor the developers more than the people, more than the community. So people are definitely feeling pushed out and they can't afford it.
So I was just gonna toss it to you, Boris, because you mentioned you lived in Huntersville. Because I was just curious as to how all of this is sort of spilling over to other communities. Because if there's nothing affordable in Charlotte and to buy a home, and I know personally I only have 1 income. And I don't know where I would buy a home. I'm renting right now, but how is this spilling over to like other communities like Huntersville, Concord, like in terms of affordability or just home ownership?
I want to make just a very quick comment. Inflation is a real thing. I was talking to an apartment developer years ago, and he said, Boris, it's hard to build a new used car. And I was like, what are you talking about? He said the cost to build has skyrocketed since COVID-19 because of inflation. So to build a Habitat house right now, the vertical costs are probably $200,000. Lot costs in Charlotte, if you can find a lot under $150,000, you're doing good. So part of what we're experiencing is good old inflation and price movements. But our wages haven't moved to keep up with the price of eggs, the price of gas. So I think that's part of the frustration. But for example, Huntersville, the Pottstown community, Concord, people tell me that, hey, I can't afford to live in Charlotte, so they're not going to Huntersville. They can't afford to live in Huntersville. They sure as hell can't afford to live in West Davidson right now or Davidson. So they're being pushed into like Gastonia, Kannapolis. And so their transportation costs to come to Charlotte to work, by the time they fill up their tanks every once in a while, that, it's hard for them to survive. So I think they're being pushed to Gastonia, Kannapolis, and the lower cost communities right now, but those costs are moving up too.
It's a regional growth, right? So it starts in Charlotte, and then it boomerangs throughout the region. And so he's absolutely right. Gastonia, Concord, Kannapolis, Salisbury, people are moving to because that's where the affordability is. And Charlotte is just a cosmo example of the affordable housing crisis and issues relating to gentrification throughout the South, Atlanta, Richmond, certainly Washington D.C. And so it's just not a Charlotte phenomena. It's throughout the country where wages simply have not kept up with the price of goods and services, which is creating this tension. And when you have a city like Charlotte, which has reached its borders, and now all the development now are infill development, it really is a catch-22 for everyone involved. The city does care. The city does have programs in place to assist folks. Again, it's that I heard someone, they don't, right? I get it. Because it's that same example I gave you earlier today about those 2 phone conversations, right? I mean, there are some people who are very adamant about seeing positive changes and doing certain things to strengthen and enhance the Beatties-Fort Road corridor, the North Tryon Street corridor, I-85 in Sugar Creek, Central Avenue and Albemarle Road. And there's others wanted to remain the same, and having it the same means that people are not growing and not getting what you're paying for.
Go ahead, Ishmael.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I think I like the point that was made about the difference between developers, or the way developers are treated in the process, and the way in which the people are treated in the process. So if we kind of take an example, like of the corridors of opportunity, for instance, like the corridors of opportunity are tied into the tax cuts, the 2017 Jobs Tax Cuts Act, from Trump, and similar types of basically tax shelters that are basically created to stimulate economic development. A lot of study has been, these are tools that have been used since the 80s under Reagan, under Thatcher, and a lot of studies have shown basically that these types of tax incentives don't actually promote affordable housing. All they really do is give money to real estate developers. So and this is objectively, so if we're talking about corridors of opportunity as a solution, as one example, right? Like, we have to be aware of, number one, like, who's benefiting from the money, and what is the ultimate result of that going to be? The other thing I was going to say was, in terms of developers and the people, the 2040 Comprehensive Plan was pretty public facing. And one of the community coalitions we were with, the Community Benefits Coalition, fought to get language in the comprehensive plan that would benefit communities. Another example is that the Community Benefits Coalition called for the creation of an anti-displacement commission, and the city ultimately created that. I'm not saying this to pat myself on the shoulder. What I'm saying this to say that organizing and collective building works. Because whether we like it or not, these are structural problems. These are problems of capitalism, but these are also problems of racism and white supremacy. And so without collective action, you can't build power to challenge the power of developers in terms of how the city or any government entity makes its decisions.
Go ahead, Winston. You had, and then David.
So, I'm gonna do a real life example to some of the frustration of what we're speaking to. I have income property in a very rapidly gentrifying area. My tenant is a black man who is just kind of on the cusp of everything. He's 61, so he can't quite get Social Security. He's almost legally blind. He can just see good enough to not get, all of these things. And his rent has been, I'm almost ashamed, well, I won't say what it, but it's intentionally affordable for him, because I know what these community challenges are. He reminds me of somebody in my family. I understand it. I have a greater sense of empathy from being from it. Now, what frustrates me is when I see a development group come in and build 200,000 apartments and make 3 of those 250,000 affordable, but not the affordable for like police and firemen, not regular, but then the local government will give them $10 zillion. And I'm sitting up here like, man, I'm really doing the NOAA, the naturally occurring affordable housing they're talking about. They want to cut me anything. Like, I'm doing the work. I'm in it. You should, incentivize people like us.
And you don't have to, right? Because this is your income. And,
but
right.
There's a ribbon cutting, and they're going to make 6 units affordable. I'm sitting up here like, man, I sure would like a piece of that. Because, again, I'm doing this. And again, I'm doing it on my own, at my own discretion. This is my decision. However, it does create a very resentful feeling to see your tax dollars going towards these groups who, create these these number of units while I'm doing it, and I just get whatever. There's no response.
Right. Good.
Just very quickly, as a seminary student, I want to go on as record as saying, you're going to heaven for that.
But I'm going broke.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah. I would just like to expand on that, wonderful human anecdote, and make the point that we all know, but sometimes we're scared to say it, that the free market cannot solve any of these problems. Yet it's in America's heritage that we bow down to this thing called the free market. The only solution, and this is where I launch into fantasy, so just watch me fly. The only solution is for the public sector to intervene in the marketplace. It means, that's not right? No.
Okay, sir.
This is exactly the issue. Exactly the issue. The only solution is off the table. So where does that leave the rest of you? Stuck. Absolutely stuck. Increasingly, towns and cities in America are actually building housing. It's got a problematic history. It used to be called public housing. It used to be 15 stories tall and became instant slums. The history of public housing in America is a disaster. But the idea in other countries is amazingly successful. So what's wrong? Is it that gentleman's attitude? The intervention of the public sector to make the market work for y'all is wrong?
Yes.
Well,
sir,
here we have the problem.
I will open it up to, I know, but I will open it up to the public and you can have your opportunity.
And there's the rub, right? There's the push and the pull of trying to be responsible in a public way, to be very intentional in a public way. For an example, Diane Ward owns a shop at 5 Point on Beatty-Ford Road, African-American female, took a shop, revitalized it, had 4 tenants in it. All of the tenants are African-Americans. Christopher Dennis, an African-American male, took the old McDonald's cafeteria, renovated, converted, now it hosts a Chase Bank. Christopher Dennis, that same African-American male, across the street from the Chase Bank, redeveloped that property, and now TD Banks is going there. Roger Ferrum, an African-American male, and his wife, owns the lot right across from the library that wants to build a medical facility there.
So what you're saying is that...
The question is, my point is this. If you don't want the community to gentrify, you can do both. You can be very intentional by investing with individuals that look like me, when the corridor has history, tradition, and value in our community. And these folks live, work, and play on the corridor. $80 million for Johnson C. Smith for the mayor's racial equity program on the corridor. So I think you can do both, be very intentional, having public intervention and doing it in a way that it makes sense for the community.
But most people don't have any money to invest in any of this stuff. I mean, I know Chris Dennis owns that property, and the bank, TD Bank, is coming and whatnot. But most people, they're just trying to get by.
I don't think you should underestimate the economic power, and we do have some on these corridors. There are a couple of examples of people who intentionally, folks look like us, move in these corridors. For an example, another example, on Sunday mornings from 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock, we got more economic wealth from the Black community on Batesville Road corridor than any place in the city. Friendship, House of Prayer, First Baptist West. And then at 2 o'clock, it scatters all through the county. So the point I'm trying to make is that the issue of this push and pull is real. What these gentlemen said earlier in terms of the historical perspective, I agree 1,000%. The question is, how do we balance it, right? How do we balance it in making sure that everyone is getting out of this city what it deserves and what it earns and what it's paid with their tax dollars?
So, Councilman,
I think
that's a great point, Councilman. Go ahead, Boris, and then Winston, and then we're gonna open it up to questions from the audience. But go ahead.
I think part of the answer also circles back to what you said earlier about making sure people have real access to tools. For example, if I own a house in an area that's rapidly gentrifying, and even with the city or the county tax relief programs, because I'm on the margin, can't afford to pay my taxes, then what other resources are there for me? Heirs property is a big issue. Estate planning, wills, how do we make sure those folks are able to have those tools and know what's coming? Because some people, this is complicated stuff.
They're not ready. They're just not ready. But understand your point, Councilman, that there are people who do have the resources more than we think. But go ahead, Winston, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for their question.
And I know Chris personally, and I appreciate the strides they've made, but I compare it to a situation like Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson is said to have integrated Major League Baseball, but it really wasn't until like the mid-'70s where baseball was truly integrated, because you had baseball players who were Black and were just kind of regular. Jackie Robinson had to be exceptional to endure all of those things. So that's not a representation of equality. I know what Chris has to go through and the challenges he has to face to be a Black commercial owner, real estate owner. So again, it's just the illusion of there's an even playing field. Even the residential side. I remember we were vetting lenders for the first house we bought. And the lender was a white man. And y'all just don't know how hard my wife and I had to scrap to get that down payment. And he looked over at us and, why don't you just ask your parents? I said, what? How dare you? The nerve. I didn't even know that was a thing. But that's just a thing they do. Really, people can do that. How hard my mama. But again, it's just the ideology of us pretending like these systems don't exist. We ain't playing the same game. And we need to acknowledge that. There can be a million Diane Wards and Chris Dennis's, but it will never compare to people who've had just a legacy of access.
Right, the hundreds of thousands of people that just don't have any.
The thing is, systems need to acknowledge that. There is a feeling of you cannot acknowledge anything with specificity to Blackness. That's why everything is coupled. Oh, Black and brown. We got to Black and women's rights. You can't say Black people deserve this. We have endured a very specific legacy of trauma and marginalization and setback, but again, you can't say that publicly because there's a history and a heritage of Black people don't deserve it.
That's true. Okay, well, thank you very much. We're going to open it up to, I see there's a lot of hands up. So the way we're going to do this is that my colleague Gordon is going to kick off the Q&A part at the podium, and then people who have questions can line up along the wall if they have questions, and you can direct your questions to the panelists, and we'll try to get to everybody. And I encourage you to come up, sir. Yes, you're trying to form your question. Thank you. So,
Yeah, so
that's it. Go ahead.
if people can hear me. So as people line up, I'm just gonna ask a question of the panel. Kind of anyone can answer. So one thing that I looked into with Lisa was the tear down of homes across the city. So essentially looking at demolition permits that were pulled by the county and where those permits were being pulled. So we were able to map out kind of where those changes were, and kind of think about this through the lens of reshaping neighborhoods. So I guess the question is, what is driving some of the tear downs of homes that we're seeing and being replaced by, sometimes much larger homes, and is this a symptom of gentrification? If so, how? I think that's just sort of a basic question for anyone.
Yeah, I'll start. I would highly encourage you to drive through Optimist Park, which was the community where the original Carter project, Jimmy Carter Park, built houses in Optimist Park. Those Habitat homes are being bought, torn down. They're being purchased for $300,000, torn down, and $800,000 and $900,000 houses are being built because of its closeness to the light rail system, Optimist Hall. And, downtown or uptown Charlotte is in view. So proximity to bars and other amenities and transit is driving the changes in Optimist Park, which are far different from when I was a kid.
So I'm an analogies guy. Right now, my wife has me doing this intermittent fasting. I absolutely hate it. But I can kind of be successful in it because I'm moving around. I'm not thinking about, food, because again, I'm busy. Now, if I had to do intermittent fasting while just sitting inside Bojangles, I know I would fall short of the glory. There's no way I could do that. And that is kind of an analogy to the illusion of these choices these make-believe choices that it seems like we have. Now, those people who are original owners of Habitat homes in North Charlotte, again, habitually yes, like you know what kind of life they live. They live in Habitat homes. And so if somebody come around offering $200,000, still undervalued that house by maybe $200,000 or $300,000, but that's the most money they've ever seen in their lives. That's not an easy choice. You're taking that money, not thinking what's on the other side. That's me sitting in Bojangles trying to make life decisions about fasting. No, you just cannot. Like, again, we have to call a thing. We have to acknowledge these certain pressures. That's how we're losing these things. How many situations, I know a million of them, people inherited grandma's house. Now, grandma's house has a lot of value. Now, you want to keep it, but it's still grandma's house because it's going to need about $150,000 worth of work. Because, grandma's house is old. Now, you have your own place, or you live somewhere, and that hill seems so insurmountable. You cannot get over those hurdles that it takes to fix up grandma's house. So you get rid of it.
So that's a good point. Winston, do you wanted to respond to that, Quilla? Do you need to hear the question again? Could you repeat the question again?
My bad, I just keep going off, I'm sorry.
That's okay, Winston, that's perfectly fine.
So I think just looking at where the highest concentrations of home demolitions are in the county, we see them in South Charlotte, but we also see them West Charlotte. What is driving some of that? I think visually we see it every day. Mm-hmm. A large home going up in the place of a much smaller one. What's driving it, and how if it is a symptom of gentrification, how so?
Yeah, I think they pretty much answered the question. Just the proximity of locations to Uptown, the light rail, which could all be systematic, of course. I mean, at one point, the Black communities were put close to Uptown, and now it's not feasible for. Well, I won't say feasible, but it's all inevitable. It's a cycle, and like Malcolm said, it's happening in all cities across the South, or really in America in general, because that's just how the system was set up. It's nothing that it's nothing specific. I won't say it's like one factor, but it's definitely proximity of location, because location. That's the biggest thing in real estate to get that money. That's how they get the money grab. In my fantasy world, to make the playing field even, the same tax breaks that are giving to these developers should be given to the homeowners, to give them an opportunity to say no to that money, to give them an opportunity to stay in that house or to afford that house. So that's just my fantasy and my input.
Ma'am, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Rhonda Simpson. I'm a native of Charlotte also, and I have a 501c3 in affordable housing. And the problems that we're having in the ground roots area of nonprofit is we don't have the opportunity. They make it so high for us to get grants. We spend money getting grant writers, doing this. Oh, you don't qualify. So the city and the county make it very hard for nonprofits to obtain money to help people, to help them in affordable housing. So that's a big problem. And I go to a lot of meetings, and the city got to really look at how they're giving out funding. They're giving it to all the agencies that for the last 20 years, same agencies, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. So if it hadn't worked, when are y'all going to decide to make a change and make it affordable or make it accessible for us to get these dollars? And we're ground roots, and we're working hard, real hard.
Thank you for the question, and I think she's absolutely right. In the city, we just got through passing a $3.3 billion budget about 3 weeks ago. We supported a number of locally grassroots nonprofit organizations. For an example, For the Struggle finally made it into the city's budget. Block Love Charlotte, which does a lot of work for homelessness in the community, made it into our budget first time. The Mail's Place made it into our budget first time. The United Way, with the assistance of the city of Charlotte, restructured how they are allocating dollars, and so they are going away from the bigger organizations to more grassroots organizations like yours that are working within the quarters of opportunity. So I think the council has acknowledged and will continue to do so to support grassroots organizations that are literally doing the work on the street, like Block Love Charlotte. So thank you for the question.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, good evening. My name is Gary Young, Charlotte native, former Director of Economic Development, then President and Chair of the Charlotte Black Chamber of Commerce. So a lot of where my position in this community, especially being born and raised here, comes from economic gain and economic wealth, and how do we generate generational wealth. Councilman, I know during your previous stint on council in 2003, you were in a position where you happened to vote against the city's MBE program for one reason or the other. One of your fellow council members stated 3 weeks ago that your current black business utilization for the city is 5%. With the city growing, as you stated, leaps and bounds, what developmental opportunities are in place to increase us from a 5% utilization rate in terms of black business utilization?
Oh, thank you for the question. A lot of people know me as an elected official, but my professional career has been in supplier diversity. I served as the executive director for the Carolinas Minority Supply Development Council, which connects minority business owners with major corporations. Served vice president as minority business development for Bank of America. All the major skyscrapers in uptown Charlotte, I was responsible for identifying minority contractors to work with them, plumbers, electricians, architects, furniture suppliers. So I have a strong background in supplier diversity. I'm not sure who said 5%. Is certainly the goals for the city is generally around 20% utilizations on major projects. And so I just don't know where you're getting your facts from. I'll look into it, but certainly the city's CBI program is housed within the Economic Development Department. I chair that committee, and I think we're right on par to achieving community-wide objectives, especially big projects like the Atrium, the Pearl District. There's about a 20% goal. We just approved a River District project. Hopefully we'll get it. It's going to be a 20% goal. And so the utilization and the working with Black and brown businesses is something that the city takes very seriously about.
Thank you for your question, sir. Thank you, appreciate it. Go
Good
ahead.
afternoon. My name is Wandra McKee. I'm originally from here. I'm down here now. I live in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So I have seen the results of gentrification, okay? We have gone from Chocolate City to pert near vanilla and whatever. I do have 2 houses down here. Sir, with all due respect, I think you're a little delusional.
Excuse me, ma'am, we have other panelists we can direct
Yes,
the
I'm
question
just
to.
saying, I'm saying this because what I'm about to address, he says, with the gentrification, we are finally getting what we were supposed to get. However, those things that we're entitled to and finally getting, we were not surveyed as to what we really needed. So most of the things that we are receiving are not geared toward the current residents and hopefully the residents that can remain. Unlike you, I'm not probably as successful, I don't have as many laurels as you do, but I'm not poor. But I can pay my taxes. There are too many people who can't. I could have gotten $1,600 a few years ago for my house that I rent. I only charged $800, and I treated it like it was mine. If she called me in the morning, the repairman was there in the afternoon. However, the other day when I came to my mother's house, I saw bike markings in the street. I'm like, what the heck is this? Bike trails? Everybody on the street is in their 80s and their 90s. Bikes? For whom? Bright Walk, the new McCrory Heights gentrified area. Why? On Irma Street. But can we get speed bumps to protect those senior citizens living on there? Because they can't, when you want to test your car, you can't go on Jennings because they have speed bumps, because the bus is there. So you come on Irma Street, where at least 4 households have people in their 90s, okay? So you're not taking in account what the people need. So these are not benefits to us. These are not things that we should have been getting all along. We should have been getting the finances based on what we were surveyed to need. I just wanted to voice my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. You want to respond?
Yeah.
Councilor Tibbs, you want-
Thank you for the comment. For sure.
Keep it short because we have.
I get it.
And I don't mean to cut you off, I apologize.
I think, thank you for the comment. This issue is tough, right? And I said that right from the very beginning. I am in total agreement with everything that's been said here today in terms of the historic nature of gentrification and the impact it has on our communities. I get it. I'm not delusional. I'm a realist, and as a policymaker, I take in consideration the historical past and where we are today and how we move forward. For an example, and I'll be short, I've been working on this corridor on Batesville Road for almost 30 years. So I've seen the changes up and down and back again. And I worked at Johnson C. Smith for 7 years. And when we built Mosaic Village, that was the first major economic development project on this corridor in 40 years. And so I understand the frustration of affordability. I understand the frustration of a changing community. But I also understand that 110 people are moving to Charlotte every day. And somehow we got to make sure that these folks have affordable housing, reliable transportation, and jobs.
Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you, Councilman. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Preston Gibson. I'm a member of the NAACP and Friendship Missionary Baptist Social Justice Ministry team. I have two questions, statement to make. How can you possibly make $10 an hour and your rent is $2,000 a month? That's not realistic. I mean, people are becoming homeless and they have kids. How can you take your children? It's impossible. In the city of Charlotte, at that low salary and the rent to mortgage are so high. And my second statement to make is, if that's the case, can they put caps on these rents and mortgages? Is that possible?
There could be rent stabilization like they have up in the Northeast. Like they don't have that in the state, but yeah.
Okay.
And I think
I'm
at
sorry?
the heart of
It's illegal. That was state legislation, and we don't have that in North Carolina.
Just saying that they have that up in the Northeast. I know there's a state law that.
Yeah. We can't do it in North Carolina.
All right, thank you.
About a week ago,
Thank you.
a few weeks ago, I read this article in the Wall Street Journal, maybe it was the New York Times, that said there's a crisis of living globally. And so the pressures we're feeling in Charlotte are really a global system that people are experiencing globally, because number one, because of inflation, population growth, cities are growing, but it doesn't take away from the hurt and the pain that we're feeling here locally. This is a much bigger problem than Charlotte that we're facing.
Yes, agreed. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
And the last thing, I mean, it is true that inclusionary zoning and like rent control are banned at the state level. However, the city has control over how it can allocate its resources. The city has control over to whom it can give tax breaks to. The city has control over the different entities that it can enter into contracts with to build housing and to build other things. So all I'm saying is that, to Mr. Preston's point, there are levers that organized people can press and can utilize collective pressure to really get some policies. Because when we talk about this, everything keeps coming back to, okay, it's the taxes, who gets the money, who gets that. A lot of that comes down to the power of our elected government, and so that's where the people are going to have to put their pressure.
Thank you.
And one other economic fact I want to add is our national debt right now is $32 trillion, and so we talk about allocating resources. As Americans, at some point we have to figure that out, because it's impacting interest rates, it's impacting the price of housing, it's impacting every part of our existence.
That's a good point, ma'am.
But also racism.
Thank you, Winston. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Ma'am, you have a question? Go ahead. Come forward.
The wealth gap has been significant. I'm sorry. All right.
Thank you, Winston.
Like, this isn't new. This isn't just a few months of no. This is a legacy. This is a heritage.
That's
inflation.
That's a good point, and we can circle back to that.
Okay.
Thank you. We have this young lady here.
How you doing, Robin?
Good afternoon. My name is Robin Price. I'm pretty much raised in Charlotte, particularly on the west side, and I actually own a home now on the west side, right up the street, actually. And so I have a comment about experience and perspective, but I do actually have a question as well. Hear all of the things that are saying, definitely see, and to some degree, appreciate the growth and the trajectory that the city is on, the considerations that it makes to some degree. I understand that's just a part of life cycle, legacy, history, and all of those things that happen. But a lot of times as a citizen and a native of this side of town, there's the constant narrative that is also false in that there's a need here, that we want things here. But it never comes with actually seeing the representation of the people to ask them, are the things that you're bringing actually what we need? The other lady said, are they actually what we've asked for? Love Archive not because of the coffee, but because of the culture that it is providing, the experience it's providing. But I don't want another coffee house on Beatty'sford Road, you know, another bank. And so stereotypically, but also in fact and in truth, when gentrification happens, it happens with the same consistent presence of businesses and establishments that, to your point earlier, yes, there are a plethora of Native African Americans who have established businesses here. They're still here. They cultivate the culture, but yet there's a limitation in them even being sustained, because then these projects come in, and again, there's never a consideration of the locals to actually ask, when you say you're giving something back, what do you need? So my question is, who did you ask when these plans came together? And then if you did not ask, going forward, what is your plan to change and shift in ensuring that there is consideration of those that are here that are going to experience the shift, to include those that will be forced out?
I just want to ask you a question before you respond to that. When you said that, what would you want to see here? Because when you said you don't want to see another coffee shop or another bank, what do you want to see here then?
What I would love to see here is some of the homegrown companies that are here. Like you have and I'm gonna forget the names, but you have the right across the street, right over the overpass. They have a hardware store that has been here. Thank you. Yes, they have been here for years. Started. I would love someone to ask them, what do you need to make sure that this place, this establishment stays? You have the social day center that's right down the street, where you have the elderly and the senior citizens that go to that social day right here. I would love for someone to ask them, do you have the resources that you need to make sure that all of the elderly that are still here in Washington Heights, Brooklyn Heights, McCrory Heights, that they even know that it's there and can get there? You know, so the speed bumps. I live on a residential street, and you know, the school is right here, Northeast is right here, and then the traffic comes in, and they literally block my street, literally coming down, the parents, but there's one speed bump the whole entire way. When you go further down the street, Dundee, there is an apartment complex down there that has had several issues. Almost every other month, the police and the fire department are there because they've had gas leaks and everything. Right behind there, when you go up the street towards Wesley Heights, I know that there is a park that's going down that light rail, a bunch of coffee shops and everything else, but who is looking at that residential apartment complex right there at the top of Dundee to see the residents that are there that you know cannot afford to go anywhere else? Who is even caring about maintaining their building? And so I get that, you know, we have to grow, we have to find ways. There is, to some degree, the culture here is pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But again, you have the tax breaks and all these other things, that there are people here that they're trying and it goes unnoticed. And it seems as if no one actually cares. They say that they care, and they say that, you know, we're here to bring back to McCrory Heights and the West Side what we took, you know, when they uprooted the houses and moved them, and that's how you got Brooklyn Heights. Most people that are making these decisions don't even know the history here.
So go ahead. You want to respond
So
to her
thank
first
you.
question?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. And I think the first question was really in reference to community engagement. Who are we talking to, right? And for the last 5, 10, 15 years, there have been so many community engagement exercise on this quarters specifically, and throughout some of the other quarters of opportunity, that many of the residents and some of here tonight, neighborhood leaders, have been involved in charrettes, planning exercise with the planning department, with neighborhood development. They've been corresponding with code enforcement. And so there's a lot of community input, and the Urban Main Street program is a program that the Business Association along the Beatty-Fort Road corridor has been engaging in for years. And so there is a way for citizens to engage, to check in, to be a part of the discussion as we're planning things. What the planning and what is being offered to the community by developers and supported in some cases by the city is what the residents of these quarters say that they wanted, right? They wanted a safe community. They wanted a safe community. They wanted a clean community. They wanted resources on the corridors like a medical facility, law office, accounting firms, more professional services, a sit-down restaurant. There is no sit-down restaurant at all on the Batesford Road corridor specifically. Those are things that are coming straight from the playbook that those who attended the various neighborhood association charrettes and meetings have asked for. And those are what the developers, African-American developers, in this case on Batesford Road, has delivered in conjunction with getting the input from neighborhoods and communities.
Thank you, Councilman. Go ahead, David, if you want to say something, and then we'll go to the next
I'd
question.
say, something which is obvious, that the development community gets paid to do their work, right? I mean, it's their job. And, I don't want to demonize developers. That's too easy an option. But it means that communities like yourselves, and I speak from 50 years of working with communities, it's a full-time job, isn't it? That you can't let things slide. And also, you've got to be continually educating yourself. It is really, community involvement, community activism is really hard. The good news is that there is a major change in the planning philosophy of many American towns and in planning education that puts communities first. I mean, when my team goes into a community, we have a big banner that goes up. It says, "Put people first."
Okay, well, so we're
Now,
gonna.
that has to be the tradition. That has to be how we work. But of course, I don't know how many of you are here tonight. Let's just say 100. There's probably 70 different ideas.
Right.
So actually, it's impossible to satisfy everybody. The whole point of community involvement and activism is for the community to have some satisfaction that they've been heard. And clearly, that isn't the case.
Well, we're going to go to this next gentleman here and make sure he gets heard. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. My name is David Roberts, and I'm a real estate investor, used to be a real estate broker. I want to address gentrification, which is the meeting we had here tonight, also affordable housing. And so to Malcolm's point, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can invest in the community, we can be part of the community. And as an investor, many of the homes I buy in the transitional neighborhoods have been properties that have gone to auction. These are foreclosures, tax sales. And so, it's an opportunity for me as an investor to buy. But the flip side, why aren't these people here keeping their homes? And, education, as someone said, is the great equalizer. We need to be teaching about estate planning, life insurance, so that people can hand down, with generational wealth, they can hand down their real estate to their heirs. The houses I buy, what's happening? The mother died and the kids are fighting. I got family members in New York, South Carolina, and nobody wants to do anything. So you know what? We're just gonna let the house go to foreclosure. As an investor, I'm an opportunist. That's what I do. I'll buy the homes, I'll renovate it. Who do I sell them to? People look like this gentleman right here. Right? So that's what's happening. So we have to do a better job in our community of teaching.
I'm sorry, you said you were going to sell, you were going to sell it to, this gentleman is a reporter. I don't know if you're selling anything to him.
Well, I'm just making a point. I'm just making a point. I'm just making a point. But the thing is, we as long as we have a free market system, gentrification is inevitable. What are you going to do?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off because we're winding down on time here. So I think we may only have time for one or two more questions. I know there's a lot of people online here, so go ahead. You can finish up your point.
And I want to talk about affordable housing. I used to be a realtor, and I worked with Malcolm's wife, Kim Graham, at BB&T when they had the CHIP program. That was a program for first-time home buyers. And I think the city and the state need to do more to help people who are living in apartments get into housing. I work with the Charlotte Housing Authority in transitional neighborhoods, and part of what we did was to educate people to become first-time homebuyers. So we need to put our resources in those efforts to help people get into housing, and then we need to teach people once they get in there how to stay in the house.
We have time for one more question. Go ahead, Winston, if you, all right, Maddie. Winston's gonna respond. We'll have time for one more question, and then, we'll have to wrap up. But we have the space to at least 8 o'clock, and you guys can talk amongst yourselves or ask the panelists additional questions. But Winston, if you want to keep that quick, and then we get these
Real quick.
Sir, excuse me. There's a order here, sir. So I would appreciate if you didn't lie. Go ahead, Winston, please, really.
So to
real
the
quick.
gentleman's point, I guess my frustration with, I understand the sentiment, and I understand, I have income property as well. But the idea that we have to approach this entire thing like a high school group project, it just blows my mind, because America is a litigious state founded on the idea of protection of property. By default, the residual of that is we keep impeccable records. We know everybody who was affected by policy, how they were affected by policy, the wealth gap. So we know exactly what we need to do. We know the answers, but we're approaching this as if we need to come together as a community. No. They did it. We know exactly what was done. We know how much wealth was extracted out of Brooklyn when they were forced to leave. We know what the highway systems did to a community as far as we know what redlining does. So why are we tackling this? Why do we have to approach this with creativity? Oh, if we try this, the answers are here.
Well,
the answers are here. Like, we shouldn't have to, again, be this creative and have all of these solutions. Just go straight to the source. We've repaired people before. We've done things. We know the system. We know. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ms. Melissa.
Right.
How you doing?
Yes.
Good to see you.
Well, thank you, Winston. We can come back to that point. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, Melissa Gaston, and I think I've worked just about everybody on the panel with the exception of 2. And so my thing is, a lot of things that have been said this evening about involvement and gentrification, the key to things that are happening in the community, I know nobody wants to hear it, but you have to be involved. And you have to give, you're saying, nobody asked us. I am on the Planning Commission, the NEST Commission, which is the Neighborhood Equity Stabilization. I was on the CBC. I was on all of those things. I sell real estate. I have a nonprofit, the Northern Community Coalition. And so people come to us, and they come to the community and ask, and I have meeting after meeting after meeting, and I have the five or six same people who come, and those are the ones who are giving the information. And those are the ones who are telling what they want. If you're not involved saying what you want, how can you do it? And it's not that you have to go physically to a meeting, because nowadays a lot of meetings are Zoom, or they're like sending out a survey, or they're saying, ask this question, get involved. People talked about the things for the road. What are they, the speed bumps? So the city changed their program. It's not this long list. You just have to get together and organize. People in Druid Hills have gotten together and organized and say, okay, we need speed bumps on this street, and they got it done. So it's a matter of knowing. So you have to use the resources that are out there. There are programs that are going on, especially the NEST Commission, the United Way. They're working on things to tackle affordable housing. I partner with Dream Key, and I'm the listing agent for affordable housing in Druid Hills. And I'm just amazed at the number. There's only going to be 22, but I have 500 people who've asked. They have $80,000 in down payment assistance on a $245,000 house. So essentially $160,000, you're able to get a brand new house. But if you're not asking, you're not out there participating, you'll never know. Winston, don't roast me. Let's go.
But you know what? No. You know I love you to death. But that's exactly the point. You got to be in 93 organizations and have 48 meetings a week just to have a fighting chance.
And the problem is that people are just, a lot of people are going from checking.
You shouldn't have to inundate your life with all of that information just to have a regular life.
Thank you.
Right. But you have to be aware, right? I mean,
you hear that list?
She's exceptional, right? But you have to be aware and you have to participate.
Okay, we have time for just, I'm very sorry, one more question. Go ahead, Maddie, your question. Okay, as soon as we wrap up, Maddie's gonna give her question. I'm gonna ask the panelists if they have anything to add, and then Raina Cash is gonna close it up, and you all can feel free to ask additional questions. Go ahead, Maddie.
I'm going to make this short, sweet, and to the point. I thank God for my strength. But to the young lady that came up, I heard her loud and clear about Irma Street and the bicycle markers going along the street. I too serve on the CEDC commission. But the point is this: you do not come into anyone's neighborhood without giving them a notification. So I heard that tonight, and yes, I'm taking up that cause. I'm going to take action on that. You did not notify a resident in the community about what you were doing. Whoever made that decision, I want them to come back out and just take up all of those things along those streets. That's going to be my request. Simple and to the point.
Take up the bike markings?
No,
Excuse me, but the disrespect is unending. I attended the Congress of something union convention center.
Yes, I heard about it.
Urban planners, building consultants, the whole gamut, and the national convention downtown Charlotte.
Yes.
So I'm at a networking event, and I'm talking to this person, and he's the planning woo in New Bern, North Carolina. And we started talking. Said, "What have you guys been doing all week?" It's a week-long convention. And they said, "Well, we've been taking bus tours." I said, "Bus tours for where?" Around the neighborhood.
Yeah, I know about that organization. They came up to McCrory Heights just a while. The Congress of New Urbanism, yeah.
Okay.
Wait a minute,
If we got.
Which neighborhood do you live in? And I said Oakland Park. He says, "Which street?" I said, "Orbit Street." He showed me my house on his phone. And I'm like, I tell my wife, "What is my house doing on his phone? A picture of my house on his phone." Apparently, they have been, that week they were going to the neighborhoods in buses. I talked to my neighbors, "Anybody seen any buses?" Now, my neighborhood president, I don't know whether she was notified or not, this was going to happen. But I just thought that was a little disrespectful. Then, 2 weeks later, the bicycle route insignia on my street as well as on Irma Street.
I hate to interrupt you because it's not fair because these two people, they were waiting, but
The people are tired of being disrespected. The people are tired of being disrespected all along the way.
Thank you.
How many number of decades, how many number of years.
Thank you.
Especially the natives.
Thank you.
The natives are really tired of being disrespected.
Thank you. It's heard loud and clear. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Roland Washington, and I'm with Action NC here in North Carolina. We also have a chapter in Fayetteville and Durham. We cover North Carolina. I'm an organizer and activist. I like this forum. I would like to ask you if we can have this conversation further.
Well, I was thinking that maybe we need a part 2 to this because obviously a lot of people had a lot to say, and obviously this was a very tight program that we had. So yes, that's something that we can consider if the panelists are up for it, if Councilman is up for it. Thank you very much, sir. This lady that was waiting, and then I'm going to pass it on to Raina.
Well, thank you all for being here, but I just wanted to say that the councilman is correct about the Urban Maine. I'm on the Urban Maine Task Force, and we have reached out as much as we can to everybody that's in District 2, everybody in this area, and we get very little response.
So it's really important that when you get these surveys that you really do complete them, because we have worked very hard to communicate with everybody around here, and you have not communicated. And then when you see things happening in your neighborhood, then it's too late. You know, when you see things being built and all of that, it's too late.
Okay.
So that's all I have to say is just you have to read what goes in your mailbox and you have to respond.
Thank you very much. And I just want to thank the panel for their time and for coming. We've come to the close of this program. I'm very sorry. I just wanted to, before I pass it on to Raina, I just want to make a couple of acknowledgments, to the library, thanking the library staff. There's Alicia Lackey for her generous hospitality and for letting us use this space so we can have this great conversation here. She asked me to share with everybody that, reading and learning is very important, which is what we've all saw here. It's important to stay informed. And there is a summer program when students take a break from school. It's critical for them to continue reading, and it poses the most academic risks when they're not reading. And so the library offers a summer break at its annual summer learning program and encourage children to come in and read and explore. So there's more about that program on the Charlotte-Mecklenburg website. And thank you again. I'm gonna pass this to Raina.
Thank you so much. Alicia, did you have anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to thank everybody so much for coming out tonight and being a part of this conversation. Thank you for the Charlotte Observer for providing this forum and for all of the panelists for sharing your insights and your expertise. This was wonderful. And as the branch manager of this library, I not only want to plug our summer reading program, Summer Break, which is not just for kids, it's also for adults, but this is your library. If you live in any of the neighborhoods or communities that we talked about tonight, this library is here for you. And just by the virtue of you being here tonight, you've increased our door counts. We don't have a whole lot of circulation here. We don't. People come in here to use the computer, but they don't check out books. And even if you're not reading, just stop by sometime, see what we have going on. Take a look at the website and see what programs we have, and this is your invitation to come back so that you all can increase our door counts again, because what happens is when you walk through those doors, the county sees the value of this library in this community, and that turns into dollars for this community. We don't have imaginary budgets here at Allegra Westbrooks, so we want y'all to keep coming back. So please don't let this be your last time. And if there's anything that we can do to support you and your families and the communities, we are here for you. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to each of our panelists. We promised in the beginning that this was going to be a spirited conversation, and I think it delivered in every way, because it's a complex, complicated topic with a lot of different perspectives and solutions that are hard to come by. And there's systemic issues that go well beyond what we see on the surface, to Winston's point. And it's hard to address those. And our role at the Charlotte Observer is to hold people and institutions accountable for the things that they promise to deliver. And I vow to you that is something that we will continue to do. We also want to continue having this conversation. If people want to email us with further thoughts about tonight, ideas, stories that you think we should be doing, things that we aren't aware of, is it news at charlotteobserver.com. Please do that. But again, a special thank you to our panelists. Please give them a round of applause. It's been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you, guys. All right, thank you for coming out, and we promise this won't be the last time you see us. Thank you. Have a good night.